Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to be here, chatting today about coordination mechanisms and governing the commons. So let's get into it. Well, what's governance? Some define it in a more logical and mathematical way, which is governance is a set of rules, and you have like an input, and this input passes through a set of constraints and a set of rules, and then you have an output. I also like to add the more like social aspect of it, which is humans, interest, and context. So even more in the DAO world, each person has a different background, have different experiences, have different context, and a different way to communicate. So governance is also having this common ground, this communication between humans. And then you have incentives for incentivizing them for aligning and for aligning these interests. So we also have a broader context, which is humans have their values and have the culture, which is what keeps the humans together towards one direction or one shared understanding. For the incentives part, we also have the market and unknown actors, because in a DAO we have just sometimes wallets like buying new tokens. So we need to optimize the rules and the process and the incentives to also consider the market and these unknown actors. Well, why governance is important? Because we need these organizations to strive. We need them to be optimized for the long term. Good governance also brings efficiency and resource allocation, which is very, very important. And one more like subjective thing is the legitimacy, or like the trust the community have in an organization. So if you don't have a good governance process, your decisions can be questionable. And that's not the way to go. If you want to build the legitimacy, you should have a good governance, or at least strive for a clear process of how the decision-making process is done. I would like to bring Ostrom's principle. So Elinor Ostrom was the first woman to win the Economic Nobel Prize, which was in 2009. And it's really cool because the work she got the prize was governing the commons, the evolution of institutions for collective actions. And this work brings some principles we should use for governing the commons. So, first, clearly define boundaries. That means you should define who is able to use this common good. Second, adapt to local context. So each local you have the common, have its own context and culture. So you should take this in consideration when doing this process. How people here communicate, what is important in that context. So apply that when doing and drawing and designing the governance. Collective choice arrangement. So this is basically make this process a collective thing. People will engage on it if they have participated on these choices, on this designing process. So also optimize for diversity, plurality. Monitoring. So all of this isn't worth if you are not keeping track and monitoring these rules and the effect of these rules. So keep close to the common and understand what is happening there. Graduated sanction, which means there should be some punishment, and this punishment should be proportional to the act. So that should be defined in the process, in the rules. Example of that in the Ethereum consensus is nodes and validators being slashed, right? 6, quick conflict resolution. So eventually people get in conflict for different reasons, and we should have a good process and path for resolving those conflicts. And, and minimal recognition of rights to organize. This means that this common and this organization needs to be recognized by the broader environment. Because if it's not recognized, then you can question the legitimacy of this organization, and that's not good. Well, why DAOs? DAOs enable you to experiment quicker on this governance model. You have quicker innovations happening. It's also more transparent. And for the mechanism part, you can program them. It's not only following rules that are written and waiting agents or some police to enforce the rules. These rules are enforced by code. So this is pretty cool. Well, modeling a governance. Let's pass through each one of those things. First, economic voting, economic model, and voting rights. Well, voting rights, it's basically what is the unit or instrument in which you can vote. Sometimes is tokens, which is the majority of DAOs today. Sometimes it's NFT, that is one unique item. New models, new DAOs are experimenting with the reputation-based model, which is something that you earn through recognition, through contribution, and it's not something you can buy. That's the idea. And multifaceted, which is a combination of those different units. Also, the economic model is important to map on this part because it defines how this token distribution happens, what is the model, for example, now's down that we will see later. The voting rights are through NFT, and they get some revenue from that. So it's important to also model the economic part of how to get this voting right. Let's go to participation incentives and voting mechanisms. Well, voting mechanisms, we have simple majority with this 50% plus 1. It's the most used. Super majority, that can be 66%. That can be, for example, 3/4. It depends on your need. We can have quadratic voting, which is optimizing for the number of participants in the voting and not the voting weight. And much more. We have really like a lot of innovation on the voting mechanism. One other part is participation incentives, which is this part right here between voting rights and voting mechanisms. So having voting rights, maybe people that have voting rights, they don't vote. Sometimes they get disengaged in governance, they get disengaged in the organization. So sometimes you also need participation incentives for make people more engaged on the voting. So this happens today in DAOs through incentives on the voting itself. So if you participate in the voting, you get some tokens that give you even more voting power, or it can be through incentivization through like salary of delegates. So in some DAOs today, we have salaries for delegates, salaries for people to read governance, to like understand what's happening in the governance forum, to ensure that the organization is governed with attention, with detail. So that's also one key factor for participation. It cannot be just, I will vote and follow the votes from others. It needs to be something thoughtful. You need to, like, good governance is made by participants which care and which understand what is being proposed and the consequences. Now, after the voting mechanisms, we have checks and balances and execution. On decision executions, we have for DAOs on-chain and off-chain. On-chain is basically you have this logic. There is no human part needed, or almost no human part needed for executing it. It's all enforced by on-chain mechanisms. And off-chain is something we will see later. I will show some DAOs as example. Well, you have the signaling of the voting in some place, and then a group executes it executes the decision to be executed in the governance or like in the treasury, in the protocol. We will see this a bit later. Checks and balances is basically if you have any veto power on that flow. So in ENS, for example, we have the Security Council, which was implemented for attack reasons. There might be an attack vector, and sometimes that's not covered by the usual governance. So you need some way to veto some proposals that can be malicious or some emergency mechanisms. That's pretty important. Sometimes it's not needed, sometimes it's needed, so it's also case by case. Now, the governance scope. What is the thing you are governing? DAOs usually govern a protocol or govern a treasury. Both are pretty important because protocol, sometimes you have some parameters that needs to be changed. Sometimes we need to upgrade the protocol. So for that, we also use governance. And one really interesting part is upgradability. So do you want your governance to be upgradable? And if yes, how this works? Today, the standard for governance is yes, you should be able to upgrade your governance because, sometimes you see like a new tool coming out and you see the fit for it, or sometimes the community needs change. So upgradability is something good to have. Governance scope, protocol parameters, treasury allocation, also defining what's a member or not, and being able to change rules. Now, proposal life cycle, of course. If we are voting for something, this something is a proposal, right? Someone wants to propose a change on the protocol, or maybe let's allocate the treasury for this grants program to incentivize people to build dev tooling. I don't know. That's up to the governance to decide. But we need to agree and document how the proposal life cycle is. So we have the submission requirements, we have the discussion period, we have the voting period, how the execution is done, and the execution delay. Execution is done as the other part I explained before. So proposal life cycle is before everything, before the voting actually happens. And now the last part is operational structure. So in operational structure, we have working groups usually. You need people to organize this, to document this, and to help people that want to propose and to ensure all of this operation is working smoothly. So you have operational support, report, and budgeting and stewarding. So working groups usually steward, like support the governance to happen, and that's something that makes DAOs or organization, like it divides good from not so good governance. which is having a working group or having someone actively there thinking about this. Nice. So now we passed it through some really important points about modeling a governance. And now we will analyze some of the DAOs or some of the governance models we have today. So the first one is, wait, I will do it. Yeah. First one is compound governance model, which is the most common one used by DAOs today. So Arbitrum, Optimism, ENS, Gitcoin. A lot of the biggest DAOs use this model, and it has this name, compound governance, because the first DAO to use it was Compound, which is a borrow and lending protocol. It's a DeFi protocol. And how this governance model basically works is that you have a governance token, which is fungible, which means like it's a number. You can have 10, you can have thousands of this token. And this balance of the token you have means the voting power. So it's a governance token because it gives rights to govern the protocol and the treasury. Well, then you have a governor contract. First you have the token contract, and then you have a governor contract. The governor contract is where you have the voting mechanisms, and compound governance usually use the majority voting, which is basically 50% plus one of the people that voted there in this voting round will be evaluated. So you have some different parameters. You have voting period, you have proposal threshold, how many governance tokens you need to be able to propose, and also the minimum quorum. So what is the minimum value that a voting needs to pass? This is the standard governance model for DAOs today. And let's go back here to ENS. So how ENS works today? ENS token is the voting power. The token was distributed to the first users, to the DAO treasury, and the first contributors. There were no investors. That's a pretty unique thing from ENS. And the governance is governing the protocol and the treasury. And we also implemented a security council here. So here we have a flow of how the governance work. First, a proposal goes to the forum. Then it gets discussed and improved. Then the proposal goes to Snapshot, which is an off-chain platform governance. Why do we use Snapshot? Because you don't have a cost to vote. You can vote for free. So it's a platform for signaling. You do like a temperature check. You send the proposal there, and delegates, which are people who have voting power, ENS voting power, go there and vote on this proposal. So you have a sense of what the community thinks about this proposal. So here, the proposal is not being executed, it's just getting a signal. And the proposer, which is who is proposing, you need a minimum of 100,000 ENS to propose. Well, the standard then is for the proposal to go to the governor. And on the governor, that's on chain. So people need to pay gas on Ethereum to cast the vote. And here, the proposal is enforced. So once the proposal has passed, that the voting has succeeded, then the proposal gets executed. And then it goes to the time lock. Time lock is another contract, which basically it's one more layer of security. And then the proposal gets executed, which can mean a treasury allocation or a protocol change, a protocol upgrade. It depends. One thing Blockful did was implementing and helping the Security Council implementation here, because with some research, with Avsa, which is one of the co-founders from ENS, we discovered a possibility for attacking the governance using the ENS token because of the condition of the DAO of having a low delegation, so low participation, right? And then also the condition of the markets to get the tokens and the treasury. So they have a lot of treasury that's not in governance tokens. The treasury was even bigger than all the tokens that were being used on governance. So there was a risk for someone to acquire ENS tokens and just like drain the treasury, and that operation will be profitable. So we implemented the Security Council for this reason. Some other details about ENS. So we have 3 working groups. The first one is meta governance, which is a group of 3 people understanding, reading, supporting governance, looking for improve the governance of ENS. So they support delegates and they look for tools and how to optimize and make the governance more efficient and engaged. Public goods, which is also a group of 3. Their focus is basically to support Ethereum public goods. So ENS, it's a pretty cool case because you have revenue, and this revenue is sufficient for the DAO to live and for the protocol to advance. And they also fund public goods. So things, dev tools, conference that help the broader Ethereum ecosystem, not just ENS. The last working group is ecosystem, which is a working group focused on evolving and supporting the builders inside the ENS ecosystem. So that's for tools and events focused on ENS. Governance mechanism, they use governor, as I described it before. So we have a quorum of 1 million ENS required. We have the proposal threshold of 100,000. And one thing I didn't mention before is that compound governance usually works better for larger DAOs, so DAOs that have a lot of like thousands of participants and have more treasury, but mainly because of the number of participants. Usually it's a slower model because you are dealing with more like stakeholders, so you have like token holders all over the world, big institutions, big numbers of token holders. So it's usual for the governance to move slower. And one thing we have been seeing is that it degrades into plutocracy. So what that means is, well, compound governance was created around 2021, and since there we can see some signals of how this governance works and what is the evolution. And plutocracy basically means that power, like money, is equal to power. So ENS was, in the beginning, airdropped, like sent to these first users, so the first community that was contributing to ENS. And with the market advancing more and the DAO evolving, these tokens get more and more to the market. And then other players start buying them and having more power in the governance. So one thing about the compound governance is that it degrades into plutocracy. Now we have another governance model, which is Moloch DAO. So governance. So Moloch DAO is not a DAO, it's like a governance mechanism that several DAOs use. It's more like it's supposed to be a model that gives you more speed, and it's for smaller groups. That's because we have closed membership. So to get into an organization that uses Moloch DAO, as a governance model, you need to be voted to get in. So you see, it's not so permissionless like just buying a token. Second, it enables rage quit. So you can be, for example, kick it out if you are not aligned with the organization. If you are like an attackant and attacker and you are submitting like malicious proposal or having like a bad behavior, so the organization can kick this member out and like reclaim his governance power. And also one really cool thing for me is that you can exit the organization if you don't agree with their decision. So for example, a voting happened, a proposal you don't agree is submitted, then this proposal gets voted and it's approved, and you are like, damn, this proposal doesn't align with me. Like this organization will be like a completely different thing after this proposal gets executed. I really don't agree. So what Rage Quit enables is that you can exit this organization before the proposal gets executed. And then you get the treasury proportionally for your token. So if there are 100 members in a Moloch DAO, and then you exit, you get 1% of the treasury. So you have you are able to exit of an organization if you are not aligned with the decisions. And this type of governance model is optimizing for agility, is optimizing for alignment of the group, because then the members that stay, they are just staying because like they believe the decisions are being done right. Also, other thing is that there is no quorum required, so that gives agility, but the con here is that you need to be active, or like always like looking what proposals are active. And yeah, it works better for smaller groups. Now, let's look at Nouns DAO. Nouns DAO, it's also based on compound governance, but it's not using a fungible token as the voting rights. It's using an NFT. So this NFT gets sold like through a daily auction every day. Every day there is a new NFT being sold. You need 2 of nouns to submit this proposal. And as you can see there is some treasury being governed by this DAO, which is pretty cool, because it's all about their culture and branding. Nouns DAO exists to, the mission of Nouns DAO is to proliferate the Nouns DAO. So they have this noggles you might have seen in some places, but their goal is to fund public goods, to make like a positive impact while also spreading the brand. And this creates all this attention around it. Today we have 12 million, but I remember seeing the Nouns treasury around like 50 million or something. So yeah, it's a pretty cool experiment. Also, we have the model which uses like multi-sig, and that's one kind of governance. So Balancer, Gnosis, these are large DAOs that use off-chain governance. And the process here is, first you submit a proposal on the forum, it gets discussed, then it goes to Snapshot, where you have this signaling from the community. But the execution of the proposal, it's done off-chain. It's done by this multi-sig. One cool innovation is this Azorius model, which gives you a really easy way to go from like a Gnosis safe multi-sig, which is one technology of multi-sigs, and gives you an easy ability to turn it into on-chain governance, which will enforce the execution of this proposal through code and not just trusting this multisig. Well, for those who don't know what a multisig is basically a contract that you need the signature, the validation of multiple persons or multiple wallets to execute an action. There's also the reputation-based governance. So we have some tools today like Community Graph, Trustful, Karma Gap, Optimism also uses it on the badge holders. It's more like a vouching than reputation as a number, for example. And reputation-based governance is really interesting because you are optimizing for contribution. You are optimizing for engagement and not for just buying the token in the market, for example. So that's a pretty cool thing. And it's still in the early days, I will say, still emergent. We don't see any huge DAO running like the main decisions to reputation. The biggest example we can use is Optimism. So Optimism, we have two governance houses. We have the token house and we have the citizen house. And the token house is where the big decisions are taken, like, for example, treasury allocation and protocol upgrade. And that's using more like a compound governance style, where the token holders are, is like ENS, basically. But then they have the badge holders, which is the citizen house. And in the citizen house, they are basically taking decisions of how to allocate the retro PGF. What retro PGF is basically one type of grants for builders. So the reputation-based governance is more limited. Is like just taking decision about the allocation of this grant. Is not taking any major decisions. So there is still this space open for like seeing a large DAO which use reputation for the main governance. Well, now I would love to hear if anyone has another mechanism of like suggestion or has seen one other. Would love to hear from you guys. If not, I can just move forward. Yeah. So we are having some technical problems.
¿Otro? Ah, ya funciona.
Good.
In English, right? So, have you seen any good examples of quadratic voting being implemented? I know that ENS did something with it, right? And do you think it's possible to have a good implementation of it on bigger DAOs?
Well, I think quadratic voting is not so much used in larger DAOs because you have the Sybil attack problem. So usual like majority voting, if you have one wallet with 10% of tokens, well, this person has 10% of the possible voting power. In quadratic voting, you are optimizing not for the value, for the voting power of one wallet, you are optimizing for how many participants and wallets are voting for one option. So this voting power kind of like gets spread, and you take more in consideration these wallets. And then the difficulty you have is basically evaluating if these wallets are legit, right? Because then you could have like this whale that has 10% could send tokens and spread these tokens in like thousands of wallets, and it could like dominate the DAO too. So for implementing the quadratic voting on like a larger DAO or in any DAO, you need some Sybil-resistant method. So today we have tags like Gitcoin Passport and other like proof of humanity tools. And now it's like up to the organization itself to understand if they want to gate the governance through a tool, for example, like Gitcoin Passport. So that's kind of like the trade-off, right?
Thanks.
Of course. Any other questions?
Thank you. I have a follow-up on that because Gitcoin Passport, for example, has become also a little controversial. There is, I think, a WorldCoin booth here around. Also, a little like people have divided opinions on it. So I'm wondering, do you have a favorite tool to prove personhood, and do you think it should be done more, or we should find other mechanisms to do it? Those.
Great question. Well, today we have a lot of other options like WorldCoin, for example. I think each one of the technology is solving one aspect of identity, but then for like a broader adoption or like for a large DAO to adopt it, there's always like too much considerations to be done. So it's not something easy. I see that for newer DAOs or like smaller groups, it can work really well. So it's basically up to the organization to decide. That's the reality. And I will say that in the long term, the tools that will prove humanity in the best way will be the tools that can kind of like prove work, because like actual work, actual contribution, it's not something machines can do. Like, let's organize an event, right? Or like, I don't know, let's like enter the meeting, chat with people. Like governance is this. Governance is talking with people. But it depends on the scope of governance, right? You can have also like AIs doing like voting or stuff. So there's different spectrums or like scopes in the governance. My personal opinion is that the ultimate solution will be tying like work like contributions to identity and use this as proof of humanity. And well, that's a hard thing to do. Like how you evaluate contribution, how you evaluate reputation. These are experiments we need to like discover together.
And do you think that, and I also see like very divided opinions on that most of our activities, for example, in a DAO should be on-chain? Because I also see opinions that say like, no, let's try to get less things on-chain. So what do you think?
It depends on what are you governing. It depends which are the voters, or like where the voting rights sit. So these days I was reading an interesting article that was basically like against and on-chain governance, and I'm on board with it because it was speaking about on-chain governance in the infrastructure level. So like how Ethereum nodes and like the governance, like the protocol upgrades happen. So in this layer, I will say like off-chain governance makes a lot of sense. Now for DAOs on-chain, like the application layer, the DAOs, it really depends. Like, and it depends on how much value is at stake, how the community feels about it. who is governing. Yeah, you have a lot of questions. Yeah.
Hi, I have a question. We were discussing about it during the lunchtime. What do you think about AI tools for governance, considering that the human decisions are based in background, opinions, and things that cannot be objective? So what do you think the incorporation of AI in those mechanisms?
Yeah. Super cool question. It's something we have been exploring around, and I think it has good upsides, which is the machine is always there, is not sleeping, does not need to like work or have other like does not have like a full schedule of things, so it can like focus and like give clear and like instant input about proposals. It can also gather context really quickly, right? So you give like all the data points to it, like you give forum data, you give the proposal data, you give like some on-chain data. So it's pretty interesting. Today, I don't think AI is mature enough for maybe running like a big DAO, like with $100 million, for example. So currently, I still we need to experiment more and make like a gradual transition towards maybe one day having a big DAO like governed by AI, and let's see how it goes. But for now, I think it's good to have humans. I think it's good to have the human input and experiment for AI to giving us more insights, for AI to give more context, and yeah, see what happens in this transition. I think it's pretty interesting.
Thank you. ¿Alguien más? No?
Okay, so now one question, right? What can go wrong with these organizations and these governance models? So here's a QR code on a research we did about the compound episode. So for those who are not aware, the compound protocol, the compound DAO, which is the DeFi protocol that like created, was pioneer in the governance. They were almost attacked. Like they were attacked, but the attack wasn't successful. So there is like a research about it where you can like understand in depth some history, background, timeline, and why didn't the attack happen. What was basically like a timing issue, basically. And to give a overview on it, it's basically that if you can buy these tokens, if you can buy the voting power in the market, eventually, if there are incentives enough, if it makes sense, economically sense, then someone will buy tokens enough to be able to take over the governance of the DAO. Because if it makes sense economically, there will be some actor willing to allocate resources to execute it. That's the market part, right? There in the beginning, in the third slide, there was the market part. So that part, you need always to be aware. It's like MEV, which is a concept in the infrastructure layer. If there is some value to be exploited, it will be exploited. You need to design for that situations. So let's take a look on Balancer and what happened. I will just explain here. I don't have the slides. But basically what happened in Balancer and how Balancer works is that they create new governance tokens for rewarding people that are providing capital on the protocol. So Balancer is a DeFi protocol, and like every DeFi protocol, they need liquidity, right? Liquidity to start having users on top of it. And then how they bootstrap and incentivize this liquidity to grow is giving the wallets, the people who give liquidity, incentives. And these incentives are paid in governance tokens. And the decision of in which pools, in which pairs, in which contracts these tokens get allocation, where this incentivization goes, is also a governance decision. So look how interesting. One big whale start buying Balancer tokens, and enough tokens that it could control the DAO. And it was controlling the DAO to have more emission of these new tokens on the pools that he was providing liquidity. So he basically was like pushing the incentives forward to himself, basically. So he was like starting to accumulate more tokens, and that's a really serious attack because he's basically draining the DAO slow by slow, like really slowly. He's not killing the DAO. He's just there getting incentives to himself and getting more power and getting more money. So that's the capture of a governance. And sometimes the capture doesn't mean like instant death, like for the organization. Sometimes you capture the DAO, like the attacker captured the DAO to extract value, to like slowly extract value. And that almost happened to Compound, like 1 month ago, basically, where Compound also has revenue, also has a lot of like liquidity and users, and then they attacked the governance, so they could like take decisions on long term that will benefit the attacker itself. So also think about this attack vector, like try to optimize or try to think about how the DAO cannot be captured, or like always take in consideration these scenarios because they happen, and they happen in big DAOs. This risk was on ENS too, and in ENS it was a really high risk because it was even profitable to do like an instant attack. So what I mean by that is that back in November, the liquid treasury, so the treasury in Ether and in dollar, like in USDC, was an amount of $90 million. And the value of all the tokens that were delegated, by that I mean the value of all the tokens that can vote, was 33 millions. So there was a risk of an attacker buying like $30 million in tokens and passing a proposal alone to send to himself 90 million. So there was basically like a clear incentive to like profit $60 million just for passing a proposal. So you need to optimize and have this in mind, because if not, it can happen. That's a fact. Well, two other problems that are 100% related to these captures or risks are vote apathy, because well, governance takes time, takes effort. If you see a new proposal in the forum, you go there, you read, you have your opinion. Like it takes time to govern, and that's not something that everyone wants to do. And even like should do, right? Because like some people just want to like be part of the project and capture the upside of the token, for example, but they don't want to participate on the governance. Usually what you should do is like delegate your tokens, but then the problem is sometimes the delegate also doesn't vote. And then if you are not looking to the governance as a token holder, you don't redelegate your vote. So you end up with a lot of like voting power that it's not used. And that's the problem of voter apathy. Then you have plutocracy, which I already mentioned before. This is the simple premise that money is power. Well, some of the alternatives, some of the initiatives we are building and exploring right now at Blockful is AI delegates, which is kind of what we mentioned before. That is a delegate receiving delegations, and it's run by an AI, so it's not taking over the DAO, it's rather an alternative for the current structure. And it's really cool because you have like a transparent bias, so you can see what is the input for what is the AI voting. Is it voting for public goods funding? Is it voting for I don't know, protocol profitability? Second one is trustful, which is a reputation primitive. Still in the early days, experimenting. We had an experiment now in Zoo, Georgia, Zoo Village. That was pretty cool. Delegation markets, which is a protocol we are building for incentives alignment. And the last one is anti-capture analytics, which is a bit of what we did in ENS. And, well, the main goal is securing the governance, securing the DAOs. Well, here's my contact. I'm at Alex Tinedo everywhere, Twitter, GitHub, Telegram. That's the QR code for my Twitter. And also for Blockful, that's in my bio. Check it out. And yeah, happy to help, jam. We'll have some session and workshop here right after the talk, and super available to jam and just help. Thank you.